Norman Conquest is arguably one of the most complex and sophisticated wars to ever happen in history. It was a bloody invasion of England that occurred almost a millennia ago. It is so sophisticated that most videos that summarize this war exceed the 12-minute mark, so few things will be shortened. We'll be lecturing all about this battle. To build a basic understanding of the war, you need to know the backstory. This video will be fast-paced to fit the 8 to 12 minutes criteria. The backstory takes place in the 8th to 9th century, when the Vikings invaded England and took control of half the region, known as Danelaw. The Anglo-Saxons, people who were in control of England before the Norman Conquest occurred, managed to get rid of said Vikings, but the region was filled with Viking settlers. A Viking raid on France occurred, called the Siege of Paris, leading to a French victory. Peace was declared and the Viking Duchy of Normandy was created in northwest France. Edgar, Queen of England back then, had a child with one woman and then had an affair with another woman with another child. After his death, his throne was competed for. His older son, Edward the Martyr, was destined to be king. However, the mother Edgar had an affair with assassinated Edward, so the throne shifted to Ethelred the Unready to become king. He marries Emma of Normandy, the duke's daughter, and together they have 3 children, whose names are Edward, Goda, and Alfred. Ethelred commits the St. Brice's Day massacre, order of killing Danes. Meanwhile, the Vikings go back and forth conquering England with the Anglo-Saxons. All the sons of Ethelred were forced to go into exile, and Edward and Alfred lived in Normandy for 3 decades before returning to England in efforts to retake the throne. They were then betrayed by the Earl of Wessex, who blinded Alfred, preventing him from becoming king. Both escaped back to Normandy, where coincidentally the last Viking king died without a heir. Edward was recalled to England to take the throne of being king. Backstory done, but time is still ticking. King Edward had to gain full support of the population, so he had to befriend the Earl of Wessex, betrayer of his brother. Edward sent him into exile in Europe, but eventually gave him back his earldom after Godwin gave him a bunch of gold. Edward also married Godwin's daughter, Edith of Wessex, creating a bond with Godwin. Godwin's fortune was passed down to his 3 sons, who all became earls and brother-in-laws to Edward. Harold Godwinson became the new Earl of Wessex, serving as a warrior and close advisor to Edward. Edward became very ill and was on his deathbed, possibly due to religious reasons, but Edward had never had intercourse with his wife, so there was no heir to the throne. Harold was a very close advisor, however, so he was expected to take the crown and throne. Remember and recall that Edward had to stay in Normandy, and his wife was a Norman, so he had many friends in that place, including the Duke of Normandy, his name being William the Bastard, being called that due to his father having intercourse with the daughter of a local tanner shop, for leather, not actual tanning. Edward then promised William the throne after he died, and Harold promised William that he would get the throne over holy relics, but Harold only probably said this because William was holding his entire family hostage. Okay, so there are 2 people who think they will become the next king of England. Wrong, there's one more. There is another person who thinks they will become the king of England, the man named Harald Hardrada, king of Norway. He thinks he has the right to claim the throne due to a treaty from the previous Norwegian king. He spent most of his life as a hired mercenary, fighting for whoever gave him the most gold. Harold announces the death of Edward. Here comes the fight to the throne. Harold rushed to crown himself, actually taking place the same day of Edward's burial. William advisors informed William of the usurping of the throne by Harold, so an envoy was sent to Harold with the demand that he immediately return the throne to William, but he came back with a refusal. William prepares for his invasion force on the coast of Normandy. However, murder of a king was frowned upon by many since they were believed to be chosen by God himself, so William asked the Pope to allow him to do this action, the Pope allowing him to, blessing the banner of the Normans. William was just about ready to invade, but the wind kept the Normans at bay for 2 months, which caused Harold, who was waiting on the coast, to leave. In the north, the wind was blowing Hardrada's army to England, defeating an army led by the northern earls in the city of York. Harold Godwinson got his army back together and forced them to march to York in just 4 days, a fast feat for an army back then. Harold's army caught the Vikings off guard at the River Derwent, Stamford Bridge. Legend says, while they were battling, a single Viking on the bridge held off the entire army and single-handedly killed 40 Englishmen, only being defeated after an Englishman floated in a barrel under the bridge, thrusting a spear under the Viking. What a main character this guy was. This delay gave time for the Vikings to get into formation, but they wore no armor, so they were defeated pretty easily over the next few hours. The wind suddenly changed, and William with his 700 ships and 14,000 men set off the Norman coast and landed at Pennsylvania, moving on to Hastings. Harold forced his exhausted army to march again, only making it to London because he wanted to wait for William. William forced Harold to meet him at Hastings instead by burning down a couple of villages. They finally both met as the armies got ready, kick-starting the battle. Harold's army was positioned at the top of a hill and decided to stay there since it was a good tactical position. William's army did have archers and cavalry as two advantages. He sent volley after volley of arrows against the Anglo-Saxons, who had formed a wall. William then sent his infantry in, which couldn't break through the shield wall. William retreated but sent in his cavalry, who also couldn't break through. Meanwhile, Harold on the other side thought that if he could exhaust William's army enough, he could charge and then win the entire battle. A strange occurrence happened though, when the Normans turned and ran away from the Englishmen. Maybe they thought William died, maybe they lost their will to fight, or it was some sort of deception tactic. This chaotic retreat caused the English to charge at the Normans, who were then encircled by the Norman infantry and cavalry reserves. Harold was killed, with the most popular theory stating that he took an arrow to the eye. The Normans had finally won the battle. Even after William won the war and the battle ended, the English nobles were reluctant to make William king, but he forced their hand by burning a bunch of villages down. As William was crowned, the locals of Westminster gave a cheer of support, but William, as the smart king he is, thought it was a riot, so guess what he did? He burned a bunch of villages down. Everything changed in England after William was crowned. English nobles were replaced with Norman counterparts, and churches and cathedrals were built. The language changed from being purely Anglo-Saxon to becoming Anglo-Norman, as the Norman dialect was integrated into the English language. Words like government, judge, castle, crown, and others came from Norman origin. Words considered more refined are usually Norman. Norman language was more classy, to put it simply. The style of writing changed, with many words in the old dialect being written with a HW instead of WH, like where, when, what. The English vowel A sounded like an O to the Normans, so you can thank the Normans that you live in a home, not in a ham. The video's not over. You viewers have something to do. This video now requires you, yes, you, want to code and type in whatever code Matthew says. But that's it from me. I understand that the war is pretty sophisticated to understand, so the questions will be easier than what you would be getting from a 1-hour documentary.